What does it sound like when the wilderness decides you don't belong? The vast, silent ranges of the Rocky Mountains have stood for millennia. To us, they are a postcard, a vacation, a challenge to be conquered. We map their trails, we pack our gear, we believe we are prepared. But the mountains hold older truths and deeper silences. In those silences, things happen that defy our maps and shatter our understanding of the natural world. This is Verified Nightmare, where every story is documented, every account is corroborated, and every nightmare is real. Tonight, we venture beyond the campfire tales and the tourist brochures. We are presenting 11 verified cases of survival horror from the heart of the Rocky Mountains. These are not stories of mere animal attacks or bad weather. These are documented encounters with the inexplicable, the predatory, and the deeply intelligent darkness that exists in the remote places of this continent. Each case is built on police reports, search and rescue transcripts, declassified Forestry Service documents, and the first-hand, corroborated testimonies of those who survived and those who did not. We will examine the evidence, the frantic 911 calls that cut out mid-sentence, the photographs recovered from abandoned cameras that show more than any photographer intended, the gear found scattered in perfect circles on otherwise untouched ground. We will follow the trails of seasoned hikers who vanished without a trace, only to reappear miles away, changed. We will listen to the audio recordings that captured more than just wildlife. The stories you are about to hear will change the way you listen to the wind in the pines. They will make you question the shape of every shadow just beyond the reach of your headlamp. If you believe in being prepared, hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. What you learn here might one day mean the difference between walking out of the woods and becoming another part of their silence. Our first story begins not with a scream, but with a whisper recorded on a handheld radio, on a routine forestry survey, in a valley that was supposed to be empty. This is the account of the Boulder Lake surveillance. The Boulder Lake surveillance. Martin Greeley was a 34-year-old field technician for the U.S. Forest Service, a man who preferred the company of data to people. His job was solitary and methodical, hiking into designated quadrants of the San Juan National Forest in Colorado to download environmental data from remote sensor stations. He was a creature of habit, packing the same brand of peanut butter crackers, listening to the same classical music playlist on his noise-canceling headphones, and logging every observation in his water-resistant notebook with a specific brand of black gel pen. The late September assignment to the Boulder Lake Basin was routine. The sensor array there monitored soil acidity and pine beetle activity. According to his service log, he clocked in at the trailhead at 7:14 a.m. The basin was beautiful in a stark, granite, and evergreen way. Boulder Lake itself was a dark mirror, perfectly reflecting the surrounding peaks. The sensor station was a small, metal cabinet bolted to a rock face a quarter-mile from the lake's shore. Martin's task was simple: use a handheld field computer to wirelessly download 3 months of data, perform a diagnostic, and hike out. He remembered the silence most of all. Not just an absence of sound, but a thick, absorbent quiet that even stilled the ever-present chatter of his own mind. It was during the 12-minute data transfer, as he sat on a rock eating his crackers, that he first noticed the discrepancy. The diagnostic report on his screen indicated a recurring power fault on a specific auxiliary port. The log stated the fault triggered 17 times in the past month, always between the hours of 1:00 a.m. and 3:17 a.m. This was odd, as the port wasn't connected to any environmental sensor. According to the technical schematic for that station, it was a legacy port for equipment that hadn't been installed in over a decade. Martin shrugged, noting it for maintenance. Then, out of professional curiosity, he pulled up the raw data stream from that port. It wasn't environmental data, it was a log of signal pings. The port, for some reason, was acting as a passive receiver, logging the presence of nearby strong radio transmissions. 17 times, something with a powerful radio had been within a few hundred yards of this remote station, deep in the night. He filed the thought under "curious" and finished his work. As he packed his gear, his own government-issued radio, which had emitted nothing but soft static all morning, crackled to life. Not with a voice, but with a burst of rapid, automated tones, a digital handshake signal. It lasted 2 seconds, then silence. Martin checked the channel. It was set to the Forest Service's secure, rarely used emergency frequency. He called in a radio check. Dispatch responded immediately, clear and normal, reporting no traffic on that frequency for weeks. He wrote it off as atmospheric interference. The incidents began in earnest. On his hike back, his headphones, draped around his neck, suddenly emitted a piercing shriek of feedback before dying. His digital watch, a robust solar-powered model, reset itself to midnight, January 1st. Then he felt a profound sense of being paced. He would stop, hearing nothing. The moment he resumed walking, the rustle in the dense spruce to his left would resume, matching his stride exactly. Not the casual meandering movement of an animal, but a deliberate parallel track. He unholstered his bear spray, his heart thudding against his ribs. The movement stopped when he stopped. It started when he started. He broke into a clearing, the trailhead parking lot, visible in the distance. Relief flooded him. That's when his personal cell phone, which had shown no signal all day, buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen displayed a single, looping line of text in its notification bar, like a corrupted system message: surveillance cycle terminated. Proceed to extraction point Alpha. Martin ran. He didn't stop until he reached his government truck. He drove straight to the district ranger station, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. He filed a formal incident report, logging the technical anomalies and the feeling of being stalked. His supervisor, according to the internal memo, suggested it might have been a mountain lion and recommended a stress leave. The sensor station's anomalous port data was attributed by the regional office to a software ghost, a glitch. But the verification comes from 2 sources. First, a private satellite imaging company, reviewing old footage for a geological survey, found a high-resolution image of the Boulder Lake Basin from that same September afternoon. It shows Martin, a tiny figure near the rock face, and approximately 200 yards to the northwest, in deep timber where no trail exists. The image shows a large, rectangular thermal signature, the distinct heat plume of a running engine or generator. No vehicle access exists for 10 miles in that direction. The second source is an audio specialist Martin hired himself, who analyzed the recording he made of the strange radio tones. Buried within the digital signal was a distinct, repeating pattern. When decoded, it matched no known civilian or military protocol. But it was identical, the specialist report concludes, to an anomalous signal pattern intercepted by amateur radio operators in 3 other remote national forests in the previous 18 months, always in areas where hikers later reported unexplained phenomena or disappearances. Martin Greeley transferred to a desk job in Phoenix. The official Forest Service case file is closed, labeled Resolved, Wildlife Encounter, but the satellite photo and the signal analysis exist in private archives. And every year, on the anniversary of his hike, Martin receives an anonymous, untraceable email containing only a set of geographic coordinates. The coordinates are never the same, but when plotted on a map, they all lie within a day's hike of a remote Forest Service sensor station. The Echo of Black Bear Pass. Eleanor Nora Chen was a 28-year-old software engineer and an elite ultra-marathon trail runner. Her escape was the brutal, high-altitude passes outside Telluride, Colorado. She was disciplined, data-driven, and fearless, tracking her heart rate, elevation gain, and pace with military precision. Her attempt to set a solo speed record on the infamous Black Bear Pass Trail, a switchbacking, scree-strewn route notorious for claiming vehicles and lives, was planned for a clear Tuesday in mid-October. She filed a detailed trip plan with 2 friends, noting her expected check-in times via satellite messenger. The weather report, archived from the National Weather Service, predicted sun, light winds, and a temperature high of 48 degrees Fahrenheit. She started before dawn, her headlamp cutting a solitary beam through the frigid air. The first 4 hours were flawless. She made the summit ridge right on schedule, pausing to take a photograph of the sunrise spilling into the valley below. The image, later recovered, shows the stunning vista. It also shows, in the lower left corner, a blur on the trail far below, a dark, bright smudge that neither Nora nor any subsequent analyst has been able to identify. It was just a few pixels. She didn't notice it at the time. The first anomaly was auditory. As she began her treacherous descent down the steepest section, a series of loose shale slides, known as the staircase, she heard a voice. It was faint, muffled, as if coming from inside a deep cave. It was her own voice. It said, "Okay, careful here." She had muttered those exact words to herself 30 seconds prior. She stopped, earphones out, heart hammering from more than exertion. The wind howled across the exposed ridge. She chalked it up to an auditory hallucination, a trick of the thin air and fatigue. She pushed on. 10 minutes later, her satellite messenger buzzed on her hip. It was a simple device, capable only of sending preset, "OK" check-ins or an SOS signal, and receiving short text messages. The screen displayed a new message. It read, "Behind you." According to the device's internal log, later examined by the manufacturer, no such message was received from the satellite network. The message originated from the device itself, a technological impossibility. Nora spun around. The trail above her was empty, stark in the morning light. That's when the rock struck her shoulder. Not a falling pebble, but a fist-sized stone, hurled with force from a cluster of boulders 50 feet upslope. This was no accident. Adrenaline shot through her system, overriding her race plan. She abandoned the trail, scrambling off the scree onto a slightly more stable-looking ledge system that skirted the cliff face, hoping to find an alternate route down and out of the line of sight. This is where the meticulous record of her technology becomes the chilling transcript of her ordeal. Her biometric watch showed her heart rate spiking to 190. Her phone, stowed in her pack, began recording audio activated, she later stated, by a mistaken voice command as she fumbled for her bear spray. The 47-minute audio file is the primary piece of evidence in this case. For the first 15 minutes, there is only the sound of her ragged breathing, the crunch of her shoes on rock, and the relentless wind. Then, a new sound enters, a rhythmic, metallic scraping, like a pickaxe being dragged over stone. It mirrors her pace, but from above. She whispers, "What is that?" A moment later, a distorted, lagging echo whispers back, "Is that?" Not her own voice this time. Something thinner, mimicking. The scraping gets closer. She stops moving, pressing herself into a rock fissure. The scraping stops. 20 seconds of silence. Then, from a point terrifyingly close, a low guttural vocalization that defies classification, part rumble, part wet click. Her breath hitches. The audio picks up a new sound, the soft, gritty patter of small stones falling, as if something is climbing down toward her ledge. Nora makes a break for it, the audio dissolving into chaotic noise of scrambling and panicked breaths. The scraping becomes frenzied, pursuing. She screams for help. The echo that returns is not a scream, but a hollow, laughing sound that blends perfectly with the wind. At the 41-minute mark, she reaches a dead end, a sheer drop. The audio captures her sobbing. Then, a final, clear sentence, spoken not by her, but by a voice that is almost, but not quite, human, devoid of any discernible source direction on the stereo recording. "Run out of trail, runner." The recording ends with the clatter, the sound of the phone hitting rock. It was found 4 days later by a search and rescue team, organized after Nora missed all her check-ins. The phone was placed neatly on a flat stone at the edge of the dead-end drop-off. Nora Chen was gone. There were no footprints leading away, no signs of a fall, no trace. The official report by the San Miguel County Sheriff's Office lists her as missing, presumed deceased from a fall in hazardous terrain. The anomalous satellite message and the audio file were deemed inconclusive and potentially fabricated, though no motive for such a fabrication was ever established. The verification lies in the forensics of the audio. An independent audio analysis commissioned by Nora's family isolated the echo voices. They were not natural reverberations. Spectral analysis showed they were slightly time-delayed copies of Nora's own utterances, but processed through a complex filter that altered their fundamental frequency in a way no known geological feature can replicate. Furthermore, the final, taunting sentence, "run out of trail, runner," was analyzed for vocal characteristics. The expert's conclusion, as stated in the private report, is that the voice exhibits a paradoxical combination of human-like articulation and a subharmonic structure found in large primate vocalizations. Yet unlike any known species native to North America, no body was ever found. Black Bear Pass remains open to hikers, but seasoned guides there will tell you, off the record, to never, ever stop running if you hear your own voice calling back to you from the empty rocks. They say the mountains sometimes learn what they hear, and they don't always give it back. The stillness of the Kicking Horse River. Declan Murphy, 52, was a fisheries biologist for the Canadian government, a man who could read a river like a book. His life's work was studying the health of the Kicking Horse River watershed in Yoho National Park, British Columbia. He was a widower, a quiet man who found solace in the constant, roaring chatter of glacial runoff. His current project involved a 3-week solo survey of a remote tributary, mapping spawning beds and insect populations. He kept a handwritten journal in a series of waterproof notebooks, his observations precise and unsentimental. The entry for September 12th begins. Arrived at Base Camp Gamma. Water levels lower than average for this period. Observed a healthy emergence of Ephemerella dorothea. No sign of human activity for at least 2 seasons. The first 4 days were textbook. He worked his way up the narrow, steep-walled valley, wading in the icy water, taking samples. The valley was unusually quiet for late summer. He noted the absence of birdsong and the lack of bear scat on the trails. He attributed it to a seasonal shift. On the evening of the 5th day, as he prepared his dinner on a small gas stove, he heard a sound that made his pen freeze above the journal page. It was the sound of a child laughing. It was distant, faint, carried on the breeze that swept down from the snowfields. It was a sound of pure, carefree joy, utterly alien in that vast, uninhabited wilderness. Declan stood, listening. The laugh did not come again. He wrote in his journal, 1847. Auditory anomaly. Possible echo distortion from wind through a rock fissure. Unsettling. The next day, the silence deepened. He realized what was wrong. The river, a roaring white torrent just steps from his tent, had become muted. It wasn't that it was quieter. It was as if a thick pane of glass had been placed between him and the water. He could see the violent churn, the spray, but its sound was now a dull, muffled rumble, like hearing a storm from inside a sealed cellar. He checked his ears, thinking he might be blocked. He clapped his hands. The sharp report was normal. Only the river's voice had been stolen. Then he saw the figure. It was midday, on the opposite bank, roughly 100 meters upstream. A small person, perhaps the size of a child, standing perfectly still among the river stones. It wore what appeared to be a dark, hooded garment, though no details were visible at that distance. It simply stood, facing him. Declan waved, his biologist's mind immediately concerned for a lost hiker. The figure did not move. He shouted, his voice strangely absorbed by the muffled river din. The figure remained motionless. He raised his binoculars. As the lenses focused, he saw it clearly. It was not a child. It was a weather-worn, uncovered stump of a long-dead tree, twisted into a vaguely humanoid shape. He lowered the binoculars, feeling foolish. But when he looked with his naked eyes, the childlike figure was still there, distinct. He raised the binoculars again, stump, lowered them, figure. His journal entry for that time is scribbled, the handwriting shaky, visual paradox, persistent. River sound continues attenuated, equipment functional, psychological state, questioning. That night, the temperature, according to his digital thermometer, plunged 20 degrees below the forecast in a span of 15 minutes. A heavy, wet frost coated everything, including the inside of his tent fly, something he had never seen in decades of fieldwork. He lay in his sleeping bag, cold to his marrow, listening to the terrifying silence of the raging river just outside. Just before dawn, he heard whispering. It was not one voice, but many overlapping, a susurrus like dry leaves skittering over stone. They were speaking in no language he recognized, but the tone was unmistakable, a cold, curious, invasive probing. The whispers seemed to come from the very walls of the tent, from the ground beneath his pad. He held his breath until they faded with the first gray light. He broke camp at sunrise, abandoning his survey. His only goal was to hike the 10 kilometers back to his truck. As he trekked, the forest around him was a diorama. No squirrel chattered, no branch snapped. The only sound was his own breath and the crunch of his boots, which also began to sound dampened, as if he was walking on thick carpet. He felt watched from every shadowed thicket. He reached a clearing where a massive rockslide had sheared the side of the mountain decades before. In the center of the open, sunlit scree field, he felt a momentary relief. Then he saw them. Dozens of the figures, small, hooded, standing absolutely motionless among the boulders, facing him from all directions. They were positioned at irregular intervals, some near, some far. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply observed. Declan's verified testimony states he counted 27 before his nerve broke. He ran, not daring to look back, the silent forest swallowing the sound of his flight. He made it to his truck, fumbling the keys, and drove non-stop to the nearest ranger station in Field, British Columbia. He was incoherent, suffering from mild hypothermia, and deeply in shock. His journal, equipment, and samples were seized as part of a Parks Canada incident report. The initial assessment suggested severe isolation psychosis or carbon monoxide poisoning from his stove, though tests on his equipment showed no leaks. The verification lies in two physical pieces of evidence. First, the frost inside his tent fly. A sample was collected and analyzed. Its crystalline structure was abnormal, forming at a temperature and humidity gradient that defied the recorded atmospheric conditions of that night. The ice crystals exhibited a branching, fractal pattern not found in natural frost formations. Second, and most damning, were the photographs on his digital camera. He had taken a picture of the river the morning after the muffling began. In the image, the water is a frozen white blur, but when the image is subjected to high contrast enhancement, faint, humanoid shapes are visible within the flow of the water itself, as if suspended in the current, their forms suggested by the patterns of foam and shadow. These shapes were not present in any photos from the previous days. A senior geomorphologist consulted for the confidential Parks Canada review stated, off the record, that the shapes bore no resemblance to any known hydrodynamic formation, and that their arrangement was statistically unlikely to be random. Declan Murphy took an immediate medical retirement. The official incident report is sealed, cited under personnel and medical privacy. The tributary valley was later reclassified as a zone of ecological sensitivity and closed to all public access, with no specific reason given. Declan has never returned to the Rockies, but he told investigators one final, unshakable detail. In the moment he broke into a run in that scree field, just as the sound of his own footfalls vanished into the stillness, he heard a single, clear whisper from directly behind his ear. It said, in perfectly enunciated English, "Stay. The quiet is so much better." The fire lookout of Deadman's Peak. Anya Petrova, 31, was a veteran fire lookout for the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. Her posting for the summer season was the Deadman's Peak Tower, a one-room cabin perched on a solitary granite spire in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. It was a coveted assignment for the most solitude-seeking lookouts. Anya was fiercely independent, an avid reader, and kept an official logbook of weather conditions and smoke sightings. Alongside a personal diary, she was a rationalist, unbothered by isolation. The logbook entry for July 17 notes, 0300 hours. Dry lightning storm to the northwest. No new strikes detected within 20-mile radius. Winds calm. All systems normal. The strangeness began with the radio. The lookout was equipped with a powerful VHF base station for communicating with the regional dispatch center in Kalispell. 2 nights after the lightning storm, as Anya was reading, The speaker erupted with the cacophony of overlapping voices. They were all speaking at once, frantic, terrified. She caught fragments. "It's in the trees. Don't let it see the light. The numbers are wrong." The transmission lasted for 8 seconds before collapsing into a loud, pure tone that made the radio's meter peg into the red. Then, silence. Anya immediately called dispatch. The operator confirmed no other traffic on the channel and no reports of any emergency. The operator suggested it was likely crosstalk or atmospheric skip from a distant emergency channel, though Anya knew the radio's filters made that nearly impossible. The next day, while on her afternoon observation sweep with high-powered binoculars, she spotted a column of smoke. It was thin and black, rising from a deep, timbered draw approximately 5 miles to the east. She took a bearing, logged the coordinates, and radioed it in. Dispatch sent a spotter plane. The pilot flew over the coordinates twice and reported back. No fire, no heat signature, no recent burn scar. Anya could still see the smoke. She watched it for an hour through her tripod-mounted spotting scope. It rose in a perfectly straight, unwavering line until it reached a specific altitude, where it then spread out horizontally, forming a thin, dark smudge against the blue sky that did not dissipate with the wind. By nightfall, it was still there, a black scar on the twilight. Her personal diary entry reads, "Smoke with no source. Like a crack in the sky." That night, the knocks began. 3 slow, deliberate, heavy knocks on the thick wooden door of the lookout cabin. They came at 1:17 a.m. Anya, heart in her throat, grabbed her shotgun and remained silent, hoping it was a bear. The knocks came again, at exactly 1:34 a.m., then a third time at 1:51 a.m. Each series, 3 knocks. The intervals were precisely 17 minutes. She did not open the door. At dawn, she examined the perimeter. There were no footprints in the hard-packed dirt, not even her own from the previous day. No scratch marks on the door. The following evening, as she was preparing her logbook, she noticed the numbers. Everywhere she looked, numerical values were subtly wrong. The clock on her satellite modem was running 23 minutes behind the clock on her weather station. The altimeter in her cabin read 8,147 feet. Her handheld GPS, calibrated that morning, read 8,112 feet. The barometric pressure on her digital gauge was falling rapidly, indicating a coming storm, while her analog mercury barometer showed steady pressure. The world's metrics were disagreeing. Her diary states, "The instruments are lying to me, or they're telling different truths." The peak of the horror occurred on the 4th night. A thick fog rolled in, blanketing the mountain in an opaque, glowing white under the full moon. The radio crackled to life again. This time, it was a single, calm, male voice. It did not identify itself. It said, "Lookout Petrova. Confirm your status. Are you aware of the secondary fire?" Anya, relieved to hear a sane voice, responded, "Negative. Only the anomalous smoke to the east. No secondary fire," the voice replied. "Look south." Report. Anya went to the south-facing window. Through the fog, deep in the valley below, she saw a large, raging wildfire, its orange glow illuminating the underside of the cloud. It was at least 1,000 acres, violent and unchecked. She gasped and ran to the radio. "I see it. Large conflagration. Coordinates approximately," the voice interrupted her, its tone still eerily calm. "Thank you for the verification. That fire was reported contained on July 12th, 5 days before your rotation began. You are seeing the Gladestone fire. It is not there." The radio went dead. Anya looked back out the window. The valley was dark. No fire, just fog. In that moment, she understood the true nature of the anomaly. It wasn't haunting her. It was calibrating itself against her, using her as a fixed point of reality to measure its own distortions. The verification for Anya Petrova's account is extensive. First, the radio transmission logs from the Kalispell dispatch, obtained through a public records request, show an unexplained 8-second burst of encrypted level signal traffic on the lookout frequency on the night of the overlapping voices, a signal the dispatcher's equipment could not decode, only register. Second, the spotter plane's forward-looking infrared FLIR footage from its pass over Anya's smoke sighting was reviewed. While the visible light camera showed nothing, the FLIR tape shows a brief, intense thermal spike. In the exact draw, Anya identified a heat signature that appeared and vanished in a single frame, with no combustible source. Third, and most critically, the Montana DIRC conducted a mandatory psychological evaluation after Anya was relieved from her post. The evaluating psychiatrist, in a confidential addendum to the report that was later leaked, concluded that Anya exhibited no signs of psychosis or delusional disorder. The psychiatrist noted, "The patient's distress appears to be a post-traumatic reaction to a sustained series of inexplicable and paradoxical environmental stimuli, consistent with her reported events." Anya Petrova resigned from service and moved to a city. The Deadman's Peak Lookout Tower was decommissioned the following season, officially due to budget constraints and improved satellite surveillance. But forestry workers who later went to dismantle the tower found something etched into the interior wood of the door, below the peephole, in what looked like a frantic, sharp script. It read, "IT knocks in patterns. Do not answer. It is learning." No one knows who wrote it. Anya Petrova swears it wasn't her. The frequency from the abandoned mine. Leo Hayes, 47, was a geologist and amateur caver with the meticulous patience of a man who reads the history of the earth in layers of rock. He worked for a small mineral survey company out of Boise, Idaho, but his passion was historical mine exploration. In August, he secured a rare permit to document and map the interior of the Silver Queen mine, a played-out 19th century operation high in the Pioneer Mountains, notorious for a cave-in that killed 7 miners in 1898. Leo was methodical. His gear included a high-end LiDAR scanner, atmospheric gas monitors, and a digital audio recorder to capture his verbal notes. His permit application stated his goal was to create a precise digital archive for the Historical Society. He planned a 3-day solo expedition, camping at the Adit entrance. The Silver Queen's entrance was a black maw set into a scarred hillside, timbered supports sagging with age. The air that breathed from it was cold, dry, and carried the faint, permanent scent of old dynamite and rust. Leo's first day was spent mapping the first 500 feet of the main tunnel. His LiDAR painted a stunningly detailed 3D map of the timberwork and vein lines. His audio logs are crisp, professional. Marker 12. Note significant calcification on the east wall, indicative of sustained water seepage, now dormant. The first anomaly was auditory, but not from the mine itself. That evening, in his tent just outside the entrance, he was reviewing scans on his laptop when his portable emergency weather radio, tuned to the NOAA station, abruptly filled with a wash of harsh, atonal static. Buried within it, Leo could swear he heard a faint, rhythmic sound like a hammer striking a drill steel. Tap, 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 tap. It lasted for 30 seconds before the clear NOAA forecast returned. He attributed it to interference from the mountain. The second day, he ventured deeper, past the old safety line where the 1898 cave-in had occurred. The tunnel narrowed, supported by newer, rougher timbers. Here, his gas monitor chirped a warning. Oxygen levels were fine, but it detected a sporadic, tiny spike in radon gas, not dangerously high, but anomalous, as if something was stirring the deep, trapped air. Then, his headlamp died. Not a gradual fade, but an instant, total blackout. In the absolute darkness, the silence was a physical pressure. As he fumbled for his backup light, he heard it clearly, the hammering sound again. Tap, 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 tap. It was close, maybe 50 feet ahead, around a bend, and it had a metallic, hollow resonance his audio log from the night before had not captured. His backup light flared to life. The tunnel ahead was empty. He proceeded, his professional curiosity now edged with the sharp unease. He placed his audio recorder on a rock, set it to record, and walked another 100 feet down the tunnel to take a LiDAR scan. When he returned 10 minutes later, he retrieved the recorder. Upon playback, the device had captured his retreating footsteps, then silence. Then, a new sound entered. A slow, labored breathing, not his own, and a faint, whispered voice in the dense quiet. The voice, according to spectral analysis Leo would later perform, was speaking in a distorted, archaic dialect of English, barely intelligible. The clearest phrase was, "The vein is spent. Can't see the candle." Leo exited the mine immediately. That night, the hammering sound returned on the weather radio, louder, more persistent. This time, it was followed by a clear, desperate whisper that cut through the static. "Light. We need light." Leo's own field notes from that night, handwritten, show a shift from scientific observation to primal fear. The entry reads, "The source is not atmospheric. It is responsive. It is aware of my technology." The third day, Leo made a decision. He would perform one final experiment. He returned to the deep tunnel with the powerful portable work light and his audio recorder. Instead of scanning, he set the brilliant light on the tunnel floor, pointing down the shaft. He placed the recorder next to it. Then, he walked back toward the entrance, stopping in the darkness just around a bend. He waited in the pitch black, listening. For 5 minutes, nothing. Then, the hammering began again. Tap, 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 tap. It was now coming from the direction of his light. It was accompanied by a new sound, the soft, gritty shuffle of footsteps on loose rock. The footsteps approached the light's location and stopped. Leo heard a long, drawn-in breath, like a man savoring fresh air after being submerged. Then, a voice, clearer than any before, filled with a mix of wonder and agony, whispered, "Daylight." A hand, pale and streaked with grime in the stark light, entered the edge of the illuminated circle on the tunnel floor. Leo's nerve broke. He fled, leaving the equipment behind. The verification of Leo Hayes's account is technical and chilling. First, the LiDAR scans from the deep tunnel, when processed with a specific filter for subtle surface anomalies, revealed a series of faint hand-shaped impressions in the compacted dirt of the tunnel wall, impressions that were not present in the initial scans from the day before. Second, and most conclusive, is the audio recording recovered from the tunnel. Leo was forced to report the abandoned, expensive equipment to his company and the Forest Service. A two-man ranger team retrieved the light and recorder a week later. The recorder's battery was dead, but its memory card was intact. The final minutes of the recording contained the hammering, the footsteps, the whispered "daylight," and then the sound of Leo's fleeing footsteps. After that, there is silence for a full 2 minutes. Then, the recording ends with the final, clear utterance. A voice, now firm and resolved, speaks not in a whisper, but in a normal, tired tone. "Tell the foreman we're coming up. The shift is over." The Silver Queen mine was officially sealed with a steel grate by the Bureau of Land Management 6 months later, citing accelerated structural decay. The Historical Society never received its digital archive. Leo Hayes provided copies of all his data to a paranormal research group. Their analysis of the audio confirms the presence of multiple, distinct vocal signatures, all exhibiting acoustic properties consistent with a human voice, but with a resonant frequency that suggests an origin within solid rock. The lead researcher's unpublished paper theorizes that Leo did not encounter ghosts, but rather a psychic impression or resonant memory of the trapped miners, somehow activated and given momentary coherence by the introduction of his advanced technology, a tape recorder acting as a spiritual tapehead, playing back a tragedy etched into the stone itself. Leo no longer explores mines. He reports that on the anniversary of his expedition, every electronic device in his home, from his television to his smartphone, will briefly pick up a faint, rhythmic tapping, always in the same pattern. Tap, 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 tap. The hiker who found his own trail, Sam DeSoto, 24, was a seasonal trail crew worker for Rocky Mountain National Park. He was in peak physical condition, knew every official and social trail on the east side of the park, and had a reputation for unflappable calm. His final task before the seasonal closure in late October was a solo, 3-day backcountry sweep of the Cut Lake Fern Lake Loop, clearing storm debris and checking trail markers. He was pragmatic, carrying a reliable map and compass alongside his GPS, and he filed a detailed itinerary with the Backcountry office. The ranger on duty that day confirmed his expected return time as 4:00 p.m. on October 28th. The first day was uneventful. He made camp at a designated site near Fern Lake, noting in his trail log that the fall colors were past peak and the animal activity was minimal. On the morning of the second day, as he worked his way up a switchbacking section of trail through dense spruce, he found a discarded energy bar wrapper. It was stuffed into a crack in a tree at eye level. It was the exact brand and flavor. He always packed a rare peanut butter chocolate chip type. He pocketed it, annoyed at the litterer, thinking another hiker had poor etiquette. An hour later, he stopped for water. As he leaned against a tree, he saw a small, deliberate stack of 3 stones placed beside the trail, a common cairn to mark a path. But this was on a clear, well-trodden section of the main trail, where no marker was needed. Furthermore, the style of the cairn, with a distinctive flat, white quartz stone on top, was one he used himself when flagging unofficial routes for the crew. A cold trickle of unease started in his gut. He checked his GPS. It showed him exactly on the red line of the official trail. By midday, the signs became impossible to ignore. He found a recent boot print in a patch of mud. The tread pattern matched his own worn in Salomon boots. He rationalized it, many hikers wore similar boots. Then he saw a strip of bright orange flagging tape tied to a branch. It was the specific, heavy-duty vinyl tape issued only to the Park Service trail crew. His crew. The knot used was a taut line hitch, the way he always tied it. Sam was now thoroughly spooked. He radioed in a brief, calm status update to dispatch, not mentioning the specifics, just confirming his location. The dispatcher's voice was a welcome anchor to reality. His plan was to reach his next planned campsite by late afternoon. But as the sun began to dip, the forest changed. The familiar trail began to feel subtly wrong. The turns weren't as sharp as he remembered. The grade was slightly off. His GPS began to glitch, showing him veering off the trail even though he was on a clear path. His compass needle swung lazily, not settling. He was an expert in land navigation, and every one of his tools was betraying him. He decided to stop and make an emergency bivouac where he was, trusting his own instincts over the electronics. As he cleared a spot for his sleeping bag, his shovel struck something metallic. He dug it out. It was a battered, green Nalgene water bottle. Scratched into the bottom was S. DeSoto. It was the bottle he had lost on a trail crew project 2 months prior, miles away in a different drainage. Sam's verified testimony states that this is when the true disorientation set in. The world itself felt like a flawed replica. He didn't sleep. He spent the night with his back against a tree, headlamp off, listening. In the moonlight, he saw movement on the trail below his small rise. A figure was hiking up the path, its silhouette sharp against the moonlit snow of a distant peak. The figure moved with his own gait, wore a backpack shaped like his. It paused, looked directly toward his hiding spot for a long moment, then continued up the trail and vanished into the trees. At first light, Sam ran. He abandoned his plan, his goal now simply to get out by the fastest route possible straight down the drainage to the nearest road. He bushwhacked through thick timber, ignoring the cuts from branches, the cold water of streams. After 4 hours of brutal descent, he burst out onto a clear, well-maintained trail. Relief flooded him. He recognized it. The Fern Lake Trail, not far from the trailhead. He was safe. He started hiking out, the normalcy of the gravel path soothing his shattered nerves. Then, he rounded a bend and saw a figure sitting on a log, facing away from him, wearing the same distinct red jacket he owned. The figure was eating an energy bar. Sam froze. The figure slowly turned its head. It was him, not a doppelganger, not a lookalike. It was his own face, exhausted, smudged with dirt, staring back at him with an expression of vacant, hollow recognition. Sam screamed and stumbled backwards, falling off the trail. When he scrambled back up, the figure was gone. Only the empty energy bar wrapper, the rare peanut butter chocolate chip kind, remained on the log. He sprinted the final 2 miles to the trailhead and collapsed at his truck. He was found there an hour later by a returning group of hikers, incoherent and suffering from severe exposure and shock. The verification in Sam's case is largely bureaucratic and psychological. The Park Service incident report meticulously logs the items he claimed to have found, the specific wrapper brand and flavor verified from his own purchase history. The crew issued flagging tape. A roll from his own toolkit was found to be missing a corresponding length, and the lost Nalgene bottle. All were recovered exactly where he said they would be. His GPS data was extracted. It shows a perfectly normal track for the first day. On the second day, the track becomes chaotic, looping back on itself in impossible ways before cutting out entirely. The device's internal diagnostic, cited in the report, found no hardware or software malfunction. The ranger who conducted the investigation noted in his summary, while the subject's physical evidence is verifiable, his account of the final 36 hours presents irreconcilable contradictions with the geography of the park. Sam DeSoto was medically discharged from his position and underwent extensive evaluation. The consensus from the psychologists, as noted in his sealed medical file, was that he experienced a profound acute episode of dissociative fugue state brought on by isolation and stress, a condition where a person can perform complex actions with no memory of doing so. They suggested he had been littering his own path and seeing his own prior movements, his mind splitting under duress. But one detail remains unaccounted for, known only to Sam and the lead backcountry ranger. When Sam's truck was inventoried, a trail log notebook was found on the passenger seat. It was Sam's own log. The entries for the first day were in his handwriting. The final entry, for the morning of the third day, hours after he had already been found and was receiving medical attention, was also in his handwriting. It read, "Made it out. Saw myself at the trailhead. He looked tired. I don't think he'll be coming back to the mountains. I know I won't." The ranger kept that page. It was never added to the official file. Sam DeSoto moved back to his hometown in Florida, a state with no mountains. He is said to avoid mirrors for longer than a few seconds. The tunnels beneath the lodge. Maya Thorne, 39, was the off-season caretaker for the historic and notoriously isolated Glacier Peak Lodge in the northern reaches of Montana. A former architectural historian, she took the job for the peace, the quiet, and the chance to study the lodge's unique 1922 parkitecture up close. Her contract ran from October to May. She was a methodical woman, her life governed by a checklist: firewood stocked, pipes drip flowing, snow load measured on the vast roof. Her only regular human contact was a weekly check-in call via landline with the property management company in Missoula. The call log shows all were routine until November 14th. The lodge was a massive log structure, built on a grand scale, with a labyrinthine basement housing the original coal-fired boiler system, long since converted to oil, but never fully cleaned of its past. Maya, in her explorations, had found a small, locked door in the deepest part of the cellar, labeled "Dynamite and Stores" in flaking paint. She assumed it was an old powder magazine. On November 12th, during a particularly violent windstorm, a section of ceiling plaster in the main hall collapsed, revealing something unexpected: the top of a rusted metal rung, embedded in the stone chimney structure. It was the top of a ladder. Clearing away more plaster, she found a small, hinged access hatch, cleverly concealed within the chimney's architecture. It led down. Driven by professional curiosity, she opened it. A cold, stale draft smelling of wet stone, and something faintly metallic whispered up. The ladder descended into pitch blackness. Her powerful flashlight revealed a narrow, brick-lined shaft dropping at least 30 feet into a tunnel, branching in two directions. These were not utility tunnels. The brickwork was older than the lodge, hand-laid. Her historical mind was electrified. She had found a precursor, perhaps a prospector's shelter or a trapper's cache. She began to explore meticulously, never venturing far. The tunnels were a confusing warren, but she developed a system, marking her path with bright blue chalk arrows. She found empty tin cans from the 1910s, a broken pick handle, and in one alcove, a neat stack of geological survey maps from 1921, detailing mineral claims. It was a fascinating time capsule. Then, on her third exploration, she found the first modern object. It was a plastic, child's hair clip, bright yellow, lying in the dust. It was clean, not dusty. It looked like it had been dropped yesterday. A chill unrelated to the subterranean cold touched her. No children had been at the lodge since it closed in September. That night, the sounds began. Not from the tunnels, but in the lodge itself. A soft, rhythmic scraping, like a chair being slowly dragged across the hardwood floor in the empty dining hall above her bedroom. She would investigate with her shotgun in hand, finding nothing out of place. The lodge's old wiring would sometimes cause the lights in distant wings to turn on by themselves. The management company dismissed it as faulty circuits and settling timber. The incident that changed everything was the disappearance of her chalk marks. She had ventured down a new branch of tunnel, marked her turn with a large arrow, and explored a dead-end room containing nothing but a rusted bed frame. When she turned to leave, her flashlight beam swept the wall where her arrow should have been. It was gone, not smudged, but replaced. In its exact place was a different mark, a small red circle, drawn in what looked like wax crayon. Panic rising, she ran back the way she came, following her memory. At every junction, her blue chalk arrows were gone, replaced by the small red circles, now seeming to mark a path deeper into the maze. She was hopelessly lost. It was only by sheer luck, and the faint draft of colder air, that she found a collapsed section of wall leading to a forgotten storm cellar exit, emerging half a mile from the lodge, disoriented and freezing. From that day on, the lodge was no longer her sanctuary. The sounds grew more frequent: whispers in the steam pipes, the distinct sound of a child's giggle from behind closed closet doors. Her weekly check-in calls became strained. The call log from December 3rd notes the manager asking if she was feeling all right, as her voice was described as tremulous and distant. The final proof came through technology. Trying to document the phenomena, she set up a motion-activated wildlife camera in the main hall, pointing at the grand staircase. She reviewed the footage each morning. For a week, it captured only darkness and dust motes. Then, she pulled up the file from the night of December 10th. The timestamp was 3:03 a.m. The camera triggered. The footage showed the empty hall, illuminated in ghostly infrared. Then, a small figure, no more than 4 feet tall, walked calmly across the frame from left to right. It was blurry, but its gait was wrong, stiff, too straight. It did not look at the camera. It walked directly to the front door, a massive, bolted piece of timber, and vanished. Not through the door. It simply faded from view 2 feet in front of it. The file was saved, time-stamped by the camera's internal clock. Maya packed a single bag, got in her car, and drove to Missoula. She presented the video file and her notes to the management company. They were concerned, but their report focuses on her declining mental state and the effects of extreme isolation. They terminated her contract, offering a modest severance. The video file was copied, but the original was lost when her laptop crashed days later. The verification is fragmentary but persistent. First, the Glacier County Historical Society, upon later inquiry by an independent researcher, confirmed that the land the lodge was built on was the site of a failed mining company town called Hope SN, which was abandoned after a tunnel collapse in 1905 that trapped and killed 14 people, including 3 children. No maps of those tunnels were known to survive. Second, a subsequent caretaker, hired the following winter, lasted only 6 weeks. He filed no official complaint, but in an email to a friend later obtained by the researcher, he wrote, "I don't go into the basement, ever, and I don't use blue chalk." Third, and most concrete, is the copy of the video file. While the original is gone, the copy was examined by a forensic video analyst. His brief report states that the figure in the footage is not a superimposition or a known digital effect. The infrared signature of the figure shows a slight, but distinct, heat differential from the surrounding room. It was physically present and cooler than ambient air. The analyst also noted a curious detail. On the wall behind where the figure vanished, for a single frame, the old lodge's temperature gauge, visible in the corner of the shot, dropped from 55 degrees to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Maya Thorne left the state. The lodge remains open for summer business. Guests sometimes report hearing the happy laughter of children in empty hallways, which the staff attributes to excellent acoustics and an active imagination. But maintenance workers have a standing order. If they find any tunnel, shaft, or opening that does not appear on the original blueprints, they are to seal it immediately with concrete, no questions asked. The radio silence of Station Kermt. Jasper Klein, 61, was a retired electrical engineer and the sole operator of Station Kermt, a low-power AM broadcast station serving the remote ranching communities of the Wind River Range in Wyoming. The station was a relic, broadcasting from a prefabricated hut atop a lonely butte. Jasper lived in a trailer adjacent to it. His life was a routine of needle monitoring, playing classic country, and reading local news and weather. He was a man of signals and clarity, of making sure the lonely ranch houses out there had a voice in the darkness. His broadcast logs, submitted monthly to the FCC, show nothing unusual until the night of February 2nd. It began with the carrier wave. Jasper was running a diagnostic, listening to the raw, unmodulated signal of his transmitter, a pure, steady tone. Underneath it, he heard a faint, rhythmic pulse. Bump, 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 bump. It was slow, at about 60 beats per minute, and it was synchronized precisely with his own transmitter's frequency. It was as if another heart was beating in time with his station's signal. He checked all his connections, ran diagnostics. The pulse remained, an indelible layer in his broadcast. He could filter it out for his music, but he could hear it in the raw feed. His engineering mind was baffled. This was not interference. It was a parasitic signal, perfectly married to his own. That night, during his live sign-off, as he read the forecast for clear and bitter cold, his microphone cut out for exactly 10 seconds. The tape of the broadcast reveals that during those 10 seconds, the carrier wave pulse intensified, and a voice was superimposed. It was a flat, digital-sounding voice, speaking in a monotone. It said, "Thermal inversion layer at 8,000 feet. Visibility 0. Entity movement confirmed." Then Jasper's voice returned, finishing the forecast, unaware of the interruption. He only discovered it the next morning during his quality check playback. The following days were a siege of technical anomalies. His broadcast antenna, a massive array of guy wires and steel, would register sudden, massive impedance spikes in the middle of calm weather, as if something immensely heavy was climbing it. His station cat, a grizzled Tom named Rusty, would stand frozen, fur on end, staring at the north wall of the hut where only sagebrush stretched to the horizon. Then, on February 5th, the calls started coming in, not to the station's request line, but to Jasper's personal landline. Ranchers, voices tight with confusion, asked why he was playing that sound all night long after sign-off. Jasper insisted he shut down the transmitter at midnight. One rancher, Clyde Henderson, was adamant. He played a cassette recording over the phone. From midnight to AM, Kermt's frequency was not silent. It was broadcasting the slow, rhythmic pulse, now louder, and underneath it, a new sound, a low, seismic grinding, like continents of ice moving against each other deep underground. Jasper stayed on the air that night, refusing to shut down. He broadcast normally until midnight, then, instead of powering off, he sat in the dark hut, headphones on, monitoring the carrier wave. The clock ticked over to 12 o'clock a.m. His transmitter's status lights indicated it was off, but in his headphones, the carrier wave was still broadcasting. The pulse was now a deep, resonant thud, and the grinding sound was accompanied by something else. Whispers. Dozens of them, layered over each other, speaking in short, clipped phrases that sounded like coordinates, atmospheric pressure readings, and fragmented status reports. Grid Sector 7. Compromise. Biological signature. Anomalous. Passive observation protocol. Initiated. Terrified but determined, Jasper did what an engineer does. He attempted to record the source. He patched the signal directly into a reel-to-reel recorder. As the spools turned, he watched the VU meter peg into the red. The whispers suddenly stopped. A single voice, clear and commanding, filled his headphones. It said, "Station current. You are broadcasting on a reserved frequency. Cease transmission and evacuate the broadcast zone." This is not a request. The line went dead. True silence returned to the carrier wave for the first time in days. Jasper, shaking, looked at his transmitter. Every single indicator light was dark. It had no power. The wall clock had stopped. His emergency battery backups were drained to zero. The verification of Jasper Klein's ordeal is a tapestry of official documents and electromagnetic evidence. First, the FCC later filed a notice of violation against Station Current for unauthorized overnight broadcast and signal interference, based on multiple listener complaints and anomalous signal strength readings logged by a monitoring station in Casper. Jasper fought the violation, presenting his own logs and the testimony of ranchers. The violation was mysteriously rescinded 6 months later without explanation. Second, the reel-to-reel tape was analyzed by a university physics department specializing in signal phenomena. Their report concluded the tape contained a complex, artificially structured radio signal exhibiting data compression and encryption protocols far in advance of civilian technology. They could not decrypt the whispers, but confirmed they were not of natural origin. Third, and most chilling, the classified U.S. Geological Survey report from that year, obtained via FOIA request, notes an unexplained, localized subsidence event, a sudden sinking of the Earth occurring in a grid pattern approximately 5 miles north of Jasper's Butte on the night of February 5th. The report suggested cause is shifting permafrost, but it includes a curious addendum associated with brief, powerful, and untraceable VELF, very low-frequency radio emissions. Jasper Klein sold his station and moved to town. The transmitter hut was dismantled. The Butte is now silent, but amateur radio operators in the region sometimes report a strange phenomenon. On certain cold, clear winter nights, if they tune to the old current frequency, a frequency that should be empty static, they will pick up a faint, rhythmic pulse. And if they listen long enough, they might hear a fragment of a familiar, monotone voice, repeating the same phrase on a loop. Passive observation protocol continues. The Trail of the Petrified Hikers. Dr. Aris Thorne, 58, was a professor of dendrochronology tree ring dating at the University of Utah. His passion was extracting climate records from ancient, preserved wood. In the summer of his sabbatical, he led a small team into a remote, high-altitude basin in the Uinta Mountains, following a tip from a Forestry Service pilot about a stand of odd-looking, dead bristlecone pines. Aris was a meticulous academic, his world governed by peer review and reproducible data. The team consisted of 2 grad students, Ben and Chloe. Their permit was for specimen collection and core sampling. The camp was established on July 10th, its location logged with the Ashley National Forest District office. The basin was a stark, beautiful place above the treeline, a bowl of tundra and shattered quartzite rock. The stand of bristlecones was indeed odd. They weren't just dead, they were preserved. No bark remained, but the wood beneath was not rotted or weathered. It was a smooth, dark gray like stone, yet still visibly wood. It felt cool and unnaturally dense to the touch. Aris's field journal entry shows his scientific excitement. Specimens exhibit petrification-like qualities without mineralization, a potential new preservation process. Rings are exquisitely detailed. Collecting core samples at dawn. That night, the first atmospheric anomaly occurred. A perfectly still, cloudless night was suddenly filled with a faint, descending hum, like a massive piece of machinery powering down somewhere over the horizon. It lasted for 15 seconds. All 3 team members noted it. They attributed it to a distant military aircraft. Their portable weather station recorded a simultaneous, momentary spike in local electromagnetic field strength. The next morning, Aris began taking core samples from the petrified trees. The coring tool, designed to extract thin cylinders of wood, met extreme resistance. When he finally extracted a core, the wood wasn't just hard, it was crystalline inside, shimmering with a faint internal latticework that caught the light. It was beautiful, and utterly inexplicable. As he labeled the sample, Chloe called out from the edge of the stand. She had found something else. It was a hiking boot, old-fashioned leather, protruding from the base of one of the petrified trees. Not resting against it, but embedded in it, as if the tree had grown around it. Using a rock hammer, they carefully chipped away some of the hard, wood-like material. The boot contained a foot, or rather, it contained a shape that was the exact, detailed impression of a human foot, bones and all, rendered in the same smooth, gray, woody substance. The horror of the discovery was clinical, slow to dawn. They found more. A metal canteen, half transformed. The steel and the petrified wood fused in a bizarre amalgam. A pocket watch, its gears visible as perfect crystalline casts within the solid matrix. They were standing in a graveyard, but one where the dead and their possessions had been turned into trees. Aris ordered an immediate stop. His scientific mind was reeling, seeking a rational vector of bizarre fungal infection. A previously unknown silica-rich gas vent? Then Ben, who had been scanning the perimeter with binoculars, lowered them slowly. His face was pale. "Professor," he said, "the trees are arranged in a spiral." Reese took the binoculars. From their higher vantage, the pattern was unmistakable. The petrified trees, which had seemed randomly scattered, formed a vast, slow clockwise spiral centered on a large, solitary rock at the basin's heart. And among those trees, they could now make out other shapes. The hint of a backpack frame, the curve of a ribcage, the silent scream of a jawbone, all rendered in eternal wood. They decided to evacuate to report the find. As they packed their core samples and documentation, the weather changed. A bank of thick, iridescent fog, glowing with a faint mother-of-pearl sheen, poured over the ridge and filled the basin in minutes. It was not cold or wet. It was dry and carried a sharp, ozone smell. Radio communication died. GPS signals vanished. The trio linked themselves together with a rope and tried to navigate by compass toward the pass they de-entered from. The compass spun lazily. They walked for an hour, seeing nothing but the luminous fog and the shadowy forms of the petrified trees, which now seemed to surround them no matter which direction they went. Then, they heard the footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate crunches on the talus, keeping pace with them just outside the visible range. Chloe shone her headlamp into the fog. The beam reflected back off thousands of tiny, crystalline facets in the mist, creating a dazzling, disorienting wall of light. And within that wall, for a fraction of a second, they all saw a tall, slender silhouette, its outline jagged and angular, like a walking geode. It did not move like an animal. It moved with a terrible, patient purpose. They ran, abandoning their heavy packs, stumbling through the fog-blind basin. They found the pass only by sheer, panic luck, bursting out below the fog bank as the sun was setting. They did not stop hiking until they reached their vehicle hours later, in full darkness. The verification of the petrified basin is a case study in official obscuration. Aris Thorne filed an exhaustive report with the Forest Service and the university. The core samples, the photographs, the GPS coordinates, all were submitted. A week later, 2 men in unmarked vehicles arrived at the university. They presented credentials from the Department of the Interior, Geological Survey Special Projects. They confiscated every physical sample, every digital photo original, and Aris's field journal. They issued a non-disclosure agreement under the guise of preserving a sensitive paleontological site. The official letter from the Forest Service to the university, which Aris managed to retain a copy of, states the basin is now classified as a zone of extreme geological hazard due to unstable radon gas emissions and pathogenic fungal spores, and is permanently closed to all access. But Aris had one piece of evidence they didn't get: a small, backup memory card from Chloe's personal camera, containing a single, blurred photo taken as they fled. It shows the iridescent fog, and within it, that jagged silhouette. The photo was analyzed by a remote sensing expert. The expert's private opinion, given to Aris in confidence, was that the silhouette's thermal signature, inferred from the light refraction in the fog, was ambient. It was the same temperature as the surrounding air and rock, not alive, in any sense we understand. but not inert either. The professor no longer studies bristlecone pines. He sometimes receives an anonymous, annual subscription to a journal of advanced crystallography. The articles mean nothing to him, but the cover of the first issue he received showed a photograph of a strange, spiral lattice structure. The caption read, "Biogenic silica replication, a new model." He has never returned to the Uintas. The basin, on all public maps, is simply blank. The Watchers at Cameron Pass. Rebecca Beck Vance, 29, was a professional long-haul trucker who took the I-40 and I-70 routes across the country. Her escape was her grandfather's isolated, off-grid cabin near Cameron Pass, Colorado. It was her sanctuary between grueling shifts, a place with no cell service, no deadlines, just the whisper of aspens and the crackle of the wood stove. She was tough, self-reliant, and carried a legally concealed firearm. Her visits followed a ritual: arrive, chop wood, light the stove, and decompress for 48 hours. She last checked in via satellite text with her dispatcher on October 5th, stating she was going dark for 2 days. The cabin was a one-room structure built in the 1950s, surrounded by dense lodgepole pine. The first night was normal. The second morning, she went to refill her water jugs from the nearby creek. On the path, she found a dead crow. That wasn't unusual, but it was placed neatly in the center of the path, its wings spread symmetrically. A small, smooth river stone was placed on its chest. Beck, a practical woman, kicked it into the bushes, thinking it was the work of a bored predator. That afternoon, while splitting wood, she felt watched. It was a crawling sensation between her shoulder blades. She stopped, scanned the tree line. Nothing. She went inside, locking the heavy door, something she never did. As dusk fell, she heard the first knock. Not on the door, but on the outside wall of the cabin near the woodpile. Thump, thump, thump. 3 solid impacts, like someone hitting the logs with the heel of their hand. She grabbed her pistol, peered out the window. The woodpile, lit by the porch light, was empty. The forest was still. An hour later, another series of knocks came from the opposite side of the cabin, near the bedroom window. Thump, thump, thump. The same rhythm. She turned off all the lights, sat in the dark with her gun in her lap. The knocks continued through the night, always 3 at a time, moving in a slow, deliberate circuit around the perimeter of the cabin. They never sped up, never demanded. They just checked. At first light, the knocks stopped. Exhausted and furious, Beck did a full recon. She found no footprints in the damp earth, no broken branches. But at each point where she'd heard a knock, she found a small, neat stack of 3 pine cones placed against the cabin wall. They hadn't been there the day before. She decided to leave. As she packed her truck, she noticed something in the trees at the exact edge of her property line. Figures. They were standing perfectly still among the trunks. So still, she had initially mistaken them for slender trees themselves. They were tall, perhaps 7 feet, and impossibly thin. They wore no clothes she could discern. Their bodies were a uniform, matte gray, blending with the bark. They had no visible faces, just smooth, elongated ovals for heads. There were 5 of them, spaced evenly apart, forming a loose semicircle, watching her. They did not move. Beck's blood turned to ice. This was no bear, no vagrant. She threw her bag in the truck, jumped in, and spun the tires on the gravel driveway. As she sped down the mountain road, she glanced in the rearview mirror. They were gone from the tree line, but in the middle of her driveway, standing where her truck had just been, was a single one of them. It was leaning forward slightly, its head tilted, in an attitude of deep, curious observation. She drove straight to the sheriff's office in Walden. Her report, filed as a suspicious trespass, was taken seriously due to her obvious, credible distress. A deputy accompanied her back to the cabin the next day. The pine cone stacks were gone. There were no signs of intruders. The deputy found a single, strange impression in the soft soil near the woodpile, a long, narrow footprint, over 18 inches in length, with no discernible toe marks, just a smooth, shallow depression. He photographed it. In his report, he stated, "Complainant appears genuine. No evidence of hoax. Impression is anomalous, possibly a weathered animal track or a natural deformation. The case was left open. Beck sold the cabin within the month. The verification comes from the new owner and from a broader pattern. The new owner, a retired man from Denver, contacted the county sheriff a year later. He wasn't reporting a crime, but asking a question. He had installed game cameras around the property for wildlife. Over 6 months, several cameras had malfunctioned at night, their infrared illuminators flaring white in the footage before the camera died. But one camera, pointed at the old woodpile, had captured a single, clear image. It showed a tall, thin, gray figure standing motionless beside the woodpile, facing the cabin. Its head was turned slightly, as if listening. The image timestamp was 3:33 a.m. The sheriff's office reviewed it and classified it as unidentified subject investigation inactive. Furthermore, a data cross-reference by an independent researcher compiling strange incidents in Colorado's Route National Forest found 3 other reports from hunters and hikers over a 10-year period describing tall, thin, gray watchers in remote areas. All reports mentioned an association with neatly stacked natural objects, stones, sticks, bones, and all described the same profound, silent observation. The researchers map plots these sightings along a rough line following the Continental Divide. Beck's cabin at Cameron Pass sits directly on that line. Beck Vance sold her rig and took a job managing a warehouse in downtown Denver, where the lights are always on and the walls are close together. She still has the copy of the deputy's report with the photo of the footprint. She keeps it not as proof for others, but as a reminder to herself. The wilderness, she says, isn't just wild. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's taking notes. And sometimes it knocks. The wasting silence of Grizzly Lake. Tom S. Rivera, 45, was a wildlife biologist specializing in the reintroduction of the threatened Canadian lynx. His research station was a cluster of well-maintained tents and equipment sheds on the shore of Grizzly Lake, deep in the Selway Bitterroot wilderness of Idaho. He was a man of profound empathy for the natural world, known for his quiet demeanor and his ability to sit motionless for hours observing animal behavior. His field notes were poetic yet precise. His current project involved tracking a collared female lynx, designated F11, and her new litter of kittens. His last satellite check-in, sent on May 18th, reported F11 denning successfully. Kittens vocal and healthy. All systems normal. The change was subtle at first. It began with the silence of the birds. Tom S. noted in his log on May 20th that the usual dawn chorus of warblers and thrushes was absent. He assumed a predator, perhaps a raptor, had moved through the area. But the silence persisted through the day. The buzzing insects around the lakeshore vanished. The wind, which usually whispered through the towering western red cedars, fell still. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a thick, suffocating absence, as if the very air had been stripped of its capacity to carry sound. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, a frantic drum in the void. Then, the animals began to behave erratically. A red squirrel, usually a chattering nuisance, sat on a stump 10 feet from Tom S. and simply stared at him, its sides heaving, making no sound. A mule deer wandered into the edge of his camp, its eyes wide and unblinking, ignoring his presence completely before walking with a slow, stiff gait back into the silent forest. Tom S.'s radio, his lifeline to the outside world, produced only a faint, dead hiss, even on emergency channels. His satellite phone showed full signal strength, but failed to complete a call or send a text. The connection would drop the moment he hit send. The most disturbing change involved F11. Her GPS collar data, transmitted to his base station, showed her leaving her den and moving in a slow, direct line toward his camp. Highly unusual behavior for a secretive feline with young kittens. Tom S. hiked to the den site. The kittens were gone, not taken by a predator. There was no sign of struggle, no fur, no blood. They had simply vanished. F11's tracks led away from the den, not in her typical lopping pattern, but in a straight, deliberate line, as if she were in a trance. He followed the signal to a small clearing. F11 was there. She was sitting on her haunches, facing the center of the clearing. She did not startle at his approach. She slowly turned her head to look at him. Tom S.'s field notes from that moment, written later, are stark. Subject F11 exhibits zero flight response. Pupils fully dilated. No recognition. Appears empty. That night, the wasting began. Tom S. woke to a sound, the first true sound in days. It was a soft, wet, fibrous tearing, damp cloth being slowly ripped. It came from just outside his tent. He shone his flashlight through the mesh. A young Douglas fir sapling about 6 feet tall was visibly wilting. Its needles were turning from green to a sickly gray-brown before his eyes, not falling, but crumbling to dust on the branch. The bark was sagging, splitting open with a series of those soft, wet tears. Within 10 minutes, the entire sapling had collapsed into a pile of inert, desiccated matter. It didn't look burned or rotted. It looked used up. Panic, a cold and clinical terror, finally set in. Tom S. decided to evacuate at first light. As he packed his critical research drives and samples, he saw that the silence had a physical dimension. A faint, shimmering haze hung in the air, visible only when the light hit it at a certain angle. It was not mist. It seemed to absorb light, making the world beyond it look dimmer, faded, and it was slowly, inexorably drifting inward from the perimeter of the lake basin toward his camp. Where it passed, the vibrant green of the moss turned a brittle ochre. The buzzing life of the forest floor ceased. He abandoned non-essential gear and began hiking out the 12-mile trail to the trailhead. The silence was absolute. His own footsteps were muffled. The usually crashing stream he crossed was a silent, glassy ribbon. He saw more animals: a moose, a family of foxes, all standing still, gaunt, their ribs beginning to show as if they hadn't eaten in weeks, all watching the same empty point in the sky. They were wasting away while standing up. He reached his truck, hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key. As he drove down the Forest Service road, the radio suddenly blared to life with a burst of frantic chatter from a logging crew miles away. Sound returned. He looked in the rearview mirror. The forest behind him looked normal, green, but in his mind's eye, all he could see was the image of F11, her wild spirit extinguished, sitting like a stuffed toy in that clearing. The verification of the Grizzly Lake event is a confusing mix of bureaucracy and biological mystery. Tom S.'s official report to the Fish and Wildlife Service triggered an investigation. A team was dispatched. They found his abandoned camp in good order. They found the pile of desiccated matter that was once a sapling. Soil samples from that spot showed a complete absence of microbial life and a bizarre chemical signature of rapid cellulose breakdown unlike any known fungal or bacterial process. The GPS data from F11E's collar was irrefutable. It showed her bizarre, direct march, and then a stationary signal for 48 hours in that clearing before the collar stopped transmitting. F11 and her kittens were never found. The most significant verification came from satellite imagery. A review of Landsat data for that basin during the week of Tom S.'s ordeal showed a pronounced localized drop in the normalized difference vegetation index (NV), a measure of plant health, in a precise expanding circle centered on the lake. The vegetation loss pattern was not consistent with fire, drought, or pestilence. It was a concentric wave of blight. The report from the USGS geologist quietly appended to the file called it a rapid, localized Dakota solution event of unknown etiology and recommended ongoing atmospheric particulate monitoring. Tom S. Rivera resigned from field work. He teaches now at a community college. The Selway Bitterroot Wilderness is still open, but backcountry rangers have a standing, unofficial order. If you come across an area of profound silence, where the birds do not sing, you are to turn around immediately and report the coordinates. No investigation is to be launched for at least 72 hours. Tom S. sometimes receives samples from other biologists, strange, wilted plants from remote areas. He always tests them. He's looking for that specific chemical signature. He calls it the silence made solid. The Rangers of the Medicine Bow. Lena Kozlov, 37, and Mark Higgins, 41, were seasoned backcountry rangers for the medicine-bound National Forest in Wyoming. Their beat was a vast, roadless section of the snowy range, patrolled on horseback. They were a pragmatic, capable team, their communication a mix of professional radio codes and familiar shorthand. Their incident reports were models of crisp detail. On the afternoon of September 12, they were investigating a report from an air patrol of an unusual metallic reflection in a high treeless cirque known as the Bowl, an area frequented by sheep hunters, but with no known structures. The ride up was pleasant. A clear autumn day, they reached the Bowl, a wide alpine basin dotted with glacial tarns and car-sized boulders. They found the source of the reflection quickly. A large, irregular sheet of a dull, pewter-colored metal, roughly 10 feet across, lying half buried in the scree. It was not aluminum, not steel. It was cool to the touch and unnaturally smooth, with no rivets, seams, or markings. It looked less like something manufactured and more like a shed piece of something larger. Lena's incident report draft, started on her handheld device, reads, "Object appears to be advanced composite or metallic alloy. No visible means of propulsion or origin. Recommend cordon and specialist evaluation." They dismounted to take photographs and GPS coordinates. That's when they noticed the second anomaly. Scattered around the metal sheet, partially embedded in the turf, were what looked like bones. But they were wrong. They were the size and general shape of deer or elk leg bones. Yet they were made of the same smooth, pewter-colored material. They were not sculptures. They had the subtle irregularities and knobs of real skeletal structures, but rendered in this impossible metal. One looked like a perfect, metallic replica of a bear's skull. The horses grew deeply agitated, snorting and pulling at their reins. Mark radioed in their find to dispatch, requesting a conservation officer and a possible hazmat team. The dispatcher acknowledged. Then, the weather changed. A fast-moving fog, thick and white as milk, poured over the ridge and filled the bowl in seconds, reducing visibility to less than 20 feet. The temperature dropped sharply. Their radios crackled with intense static, then died completely, their power indicators going dark. In the sudden, muffled silence, they heard a new sound, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating up through the soles of their boots. They decided to retreat, to lead the horses out on foot. But the fog disoriented them instantly. The landmarks vanished. After 10 minutes of walking, Lena stopped. "Mark," she said, her voice tight. "We're walking in a circle." They had come across one of the metallic bones again. Then they saw the light. A soft, diffuse glow emanated from the fog ahead, not like a beam, but like something luminous was hovering just within the opacity. The hum intensified, now accompanied by a faint, high-pitched harmonic that set their teeth on edge. Then, the figures appeared. They resolved slowly from the fog, standing motionless between the boulders. They were tall, over 7 feet, and their outlines were vaguely humanoid, but elongated, with limbs that seemed too long and jointed in subtly wrong places. They were not made of flesh, nor of the dull pewter metal. They seemed to be composed of the fog itself, a swirling, cohesive mist that held a humanoid shape, with 2 darker patches where eyes might be. There were 6 of them, forming a loose ring around the rangers and the horses. The animals were frozen in terror, trembling. The figures did not approach. They simply observed. Lena would later testify that the feeling was not of being hunted, but of being assessed, with a cold, impersonal curiosity. One of the figures raised a long, mist-wreathed arm and pointed not at the rangers, but at the metallic sheet half buried in the ground. The hum changed pitch, becoming briefly melodic, almost questioning. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the fog began to thin. The luminous glow faded. The figures dissipated, not walking away, but unforming, their mist, rejoining the greater bank now retreating up the ridge. Within 2 minutes, the sun shone again on the bowl. The radio sputtered back to life with the frantic voice of dispatch checking on them. The metallic sheet and the bones were gone. Only disturbed scree and a few deep, narrow impressions in the soft turf remained where they had lain. The verification of the ranger's account is perhaps the strongest of any story, due entirely to their credibility and the physical evidence left behind. Their combined, separate incident reports, filed immediately upon return, matched in every detail. Their radios and GPS units were sent for diagnostic analysis. The report from the Forest Service's Communications Division stated the devices had experienced a massive, localized electromagnetic pulse event, which fried certain circuits but left others oddly untouched. Soil samples from the site showed microscopic spherules of an unknown alloy, primarily iron and nickel, but with trace elements not found in any natural meteoritic or terrestrial sample. Most critically, the deep impressions in the turf were cast in plaster by a skeptical sheriff's deputy. The cast revealed a pattern, not a footprint, but a triangular, tripodal indentation, as if the objects had been resting on three slender, pointed legs. A physicist from the University of Wyoming, consulted informally, stated the pattern was consistent with a method of stabilization, but the pressure exerted per square inch, calculated from the depth and soil density, implied an object far heavier than any possible metallic bone of that size. Lena and Mark were placed on mandatory administrative leave and subjected to independent psychological evaluation. Both were cleared, with the psychologists noting their accounts were unchanging, internally consistent, and delivered without embellishment or sought after notoriety. The official Forest Service file on the incident is classified, citing ongoing investigation of potential hazardous material dumping. The bowl was never officially closed, but the backcountry patrol schedule was quietly rerouted. Both rangers eventually returned to duty, but not together and not in the snowy range. They have never spoken publicly, but in the tight-knit community of federal rangers, the story is known in whispers. They call it the day the mountain took inventory. And every now and then a hunter or hiker in the high lonely cirques of the medicine boughs will report a sudden silent fog that comes and goes against the wind, and a feeling of being watched by something that is no longer there. The final transmission of Ranger Station Foxtrot. Captain David Hale, 52, was a 25-year veteran of the Colorado State Patrol, a man who had seen every manner of highway tragedy and human error. His assignment for the winter of that year was unusual: command a temporary, 4-person highway safety outpost at the site of Ranger Station Foxtrot, a decommissioned forestry station on the $1 Million Highway S-550 south of Erie. The station was reactivated due to a catastrophic closure of the main tunnel, forcing all traffic onto the notoriously treacherous, avalanche-prone surface route. Hill was a by-the-book leader, a believer in procedure and clear communication. His team's logbooks were precise, their radio discipline impeccable. The mission was simple: monitor weather, assist stranded motorists, and coordinate with avalanche control. The station was a sturdy, 2-room log cabin with a generator and a powerful VHF base station that could reach every corner of the jagged, cliff-walled pass. The first 2 weeks were brutally cold, but routine. They logged spineouts, issued warnings, and watched the snow pile up in towering cornices. The logbook entry for February 2nd, written by Officer Jenna Miller, notes: 2000 hours. Heavy snowfall, 0 visibility. All commercial traffic halted. Patrol 1 and 2 secure at station. Radio contact with Erie dispatch stable. The anomaly began at 2:17 a.m. on February 3rd. The station's landline, a hardwired connection considered more reliable than radio, rang. Hale answered. The line hissed with empty static, but beneath it, he could hear what sounded like faint, hurried conversation and the clatter of telegraph keys and antiquated sound. A voice, thin and strained as if from a great distance, broke through. Foxtrot, this is Silverton Central. Do you copy the slide at marker 97? Over. Hale knew the history. Silverton Central was the dispatcher call sign for the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, which hadn't run trains through that pass since the 1930s. He responded, "This is State Patrol at Foxtrot. Identify yourself." The line went dead with the sharp click. An hour later, their external motion sensors, set up to detect avalanche movement on the slopes above, triggered in a rapid, sequential pattern descending the mountain toward the station, pattern inconsistent with snow movement. It suggested multiple, discrete points of origin moving in a coordinated line. A patrol went to the exterior camera monitor. The screen showed only the blinding white of the blizzard, but in the audio feed from the camera's microphone, they could hear it, a deep, rhythmic crunch of footsteps in the snow, approaching the station's perimeter fence. The footsteps circled the station once, then stopped at the front door. No figure appeared on the camera. The door's heavy iron latch was seen on the monitor to lift, then drop, clack, as if tested from the outside. Officer Miller logged it as probable wildlife and wind. Hale wasn't convinced. He ordered a radio check with all known entities in the pass, county plows, the lone remaining ski resort, the Erie jail. All responded. Then, at 4:00 a.m., their primary VHF radio lit up with a transmission on a frequency not listed in their charts. It was a clear, calm male voice, speaking with the measured cadence of a mid-20th century radio announcer. "Attention all stations on the pass. This is a blizzard warning from the Silverton Weather Observatory. A confirmed whiteout condition is in effect. Temperatures dropping to 50 below zero. Advise all motorists to shelter in place. Do not, repeat, do not attempt to travel. The road is not secure." The transmission ended. Hale immediately contacted the National Weather Service. They had issued no such warning, and the Silverton Weather Observatory had been demolished in 1958. From that point, the station began to lose time. Clocks would be seen lagging minutes behind synchronized watches. The logbook entries from officers Miller and Chen show a growing discrepancy in their timelines for events. Security camera timestamps began to jump, showing gaps of several minutes between frames. It was as if reality itself was stuttering around their little cabin. The final incident occurred just before dawn. The blizzard was at its peak. The radio crackled again, this time with a panicked, screaming voice, cutting in and out. "Durr! We're off the rails at the switchback. Cars going over the god." The screaming "can anyone hear" was the sound of a historic train disaster, playing itself out on the modern airwaves. Simultaneously, the landline rang again. Hale picked it up. This time, the voice was clear, cold, and authoritative. "Captain Hale, you and your personnel are occupying an active incident site. You must evacuate immediately via the southbound lane. Do not use the northbound lane. Do not acknowledge this message. Simply comply. You have 7 minutes." The line went dead. Hale made a command decision. He ordered his team to their patrol SUVs. They would drive south toward Silverton, as instructed. As they prepared to leave, Officer Chen pointed a trembling finger at the north-facing window. Outside, in the howling snow, a line of faint, shimmering lights was descending the northbound lane, lights that resolved into the ghostly outlines of old-fashioned railroad lanterns, held by invisible hands, swinging slowly as if marking a path or a perimeter. They fled south, fighting the skidding tires and whiteout conditions. As they passed mile marker 99, Hale looked in his rearview mirror. Through the blowing snow, he saw the lights of their station, still burning in the window. And then he saw other lights, brighter, colder, flooding the station from above, like the landing lights of a vast, silent aircraft. Then, the radio in his SUV, still tuned to the station's security channel, transmitted one final burst of audio before going permanently silent. The sound of their own front door being slowly, deliberately, opened from the inside. The verification of the Foxtrot incident is buried in interagency reports and technical data. First, the Colorado Department of Transportation's avalanche control log notes an unexplained, localized seismic event registered on their sensors near the old station at the precise time of the evacuation, with a signature unlike any avalanche or rockfall. Second, a forensic analysis of the station's phone records, obtained through a public records lawsuit, shows the 2 incoming calls Hale reported. The first originated from a number that had been disconnected since 1947. The second showed no point of origin at all. It was logged as a direct line injection. Third, and most compelling, is the security camera hard drive recovered from the station days later when the storm cleared. The final minutes of footage are corrupted into digital snow, except for a single, clear frame. It shows the interior of the station's main room, empty. Reflected in the dark glass of the south-facing window is the silhouette of a man in what appears to be an old-style railroad conductor's uniform, standing inside the room, looking out. His face is a blur, but he is holding a lantern. Captain Hale was given a medical retirement for PTSD. The official State Patrol report concludes the team suffered a mass, shared hallucinatory episode due to isolation, infrasound from the storm, and high-altitude hypoxia. Ranger Station Foxtrot was demolished that summer, cited as a structural hazard. The new tunnel opened on schedule. Today, if you drive the $1 Million Highway in a blizzard, truckers on the CB radio will sometimes warn each other about the conductor. They say if your radio picks up a old-time weather report, or if you see swinging lanterns in the northbound lane, you turn around. Because that means you're not just on the highway, you're driving through someone else's disaster, and it's still happening, over and over again, just out of phase with our own time. And sometimes, it needs new witnesses. 11 stories. 11 documented incursions into the reality we think we understand. We have followed the digital breadcrumbs left in corrupted sensor data. We have listened to the echoes of tragedies trapped in stone and radio waves. We have seen the evidence in satellite photos, in forensic audio analysis, in the cold, impersonal language of official reports that strain to explain away the impossible. A forestry technician's routine download that revealed a pattern of nocturnal surveillance with no source. A trail runner's own biometric data betraying her to a mimic in the rocks. A silent river, a stolen sound, and whispered invitations to stay in the quiet. A fire lookout's instruments lying to her as something learned the shape of a human witness. The desperate, fossilized plea of miners forever reaching for a light that went out a century ago. A man pursued by the literal trail of his own past actions. The lingering cold in an empty lodge where history refuses to stay buried. A radio signal that began to think for itself. A stand of trees that were not trees, but a library of stolen lives. Silent, patient watchers who stack pine cones like a catalog. A wave of silence that consumed life itself. And a highway outpost that became a stage for a disaster on eternal replay. These are not ghost stories. They are case files. The consistent evidence points to a chilling hypothesis. The remote wilderness of the Rocky Mountains is not simply a place. It is, in certain locations, under certain conditions, an interface. A place where the barrier between what we know and what we cannot comprehend grows thin. The phenomena are diverse, seeming to involve time, consciousness, biology, and technology in ways that blur their definitions, but they share a common thread: a cold, often intelligent, and always unsettling interactivity. These are not mindless hauntings. They are engagements, experiments, observations, and in some cases, reclamations. The official response is always the same: to classify, to seal, to redact, to attribute to natural causes, or psychological stress. They are not lying. They are containing, because the truth is a cognitive poison. The truth is that we share this continent with presences whose motives and origins are as inscrutable as the mountains themselves. We map the trails, but we do not own the silence between them. This is why verification matters. It is the only shield against being dismissed as mere fantasy. It is the line that separates a campfire tale from a warning. So, what do you do with this information? You trust your instincts. If you are in the backcountry and the birds fall silent for no reason, leave. If your technology begins to behave in ways that defy its design, retreat. If you find a path that seems too convenient, a trail marker that wasn't there before, a feeling of being paced by something that matches your step to perfectly. Your first mistake was your last. Get out. You stay informed. The world is stranger than you have been led to believe. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell for verified nightmare. We are your research division, compiling the evidence the official channels bury. In a reality where these stories are true, Awareness is your first and best line of defense. You help others. Like this video. That simple action helps the algorithm guide other truth seekers to this channel, to this community. It builds a network of the aware, and you bear witness. Comment below with your own accounts. We investigate every serious submission. Your story could be the crucial data point that connects to another, that reveals the larger pattern, hiding in plain sight. The mountains will always be there. Their beauty is real. Their danger is documented. But their deepest secrets, their oldest, most silent residents, those we are only beginning to record. This has been Verified Nightmare. Remember, the most terrifying thing in the wilderness is not what you came to find. It's what finds you. Stay safe.